I hope you've all had a great Tuesday. Welcome back to the last word on Bakes on Things. Mark Carney wants you to believe that he's about to remake this country as a hero. He calls it Canada 2.0, and in his speeches, he keeps comparing today's situation to what Canada went through after the Second World War. He says the budget coming November 4th will be the most transformative since 1945. Now, that sounds big to all of us, I'm sure, but this is what he always does. He makes something sound historic, but let's call it what it is. It's complete and utter nonsense spewed by Carney. He's borrowing the drama of history without delivering any substance at all, and we're going to take a look at it. Let's go.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
Welcome back to the last word here on Bakes on Things. It's the end of your Tuesday. It's also the end of your month, September 30th. And of course, a brand new month begins tomorrow. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and of course, join the conversation down below. My name is Chris Baker, and here we go. After the Depression and then 6 years of global war, Canada in 1945 had been through the ringer. People knew what sacrifice meant back then. They'd lived with ration, books, shortages, and the uncertainty of sending family members off to fight overseas and whether they would even come back at all. When peace came, Canadians were united in one mission post-war. That was to rebuild Canada and grow. Out of that, they built homes, they built families, they built the infrastructure that powered this country for generations. They built the Trans-Canada Highway, the St. Lawrence Seaway, oil pipelines, power grids, rail expansion. Mark Carney says what he's about to do is just as big as all of that. But if you compare that to Carney's so-called transformation, his headline, tough decision so far, well, he's ending door-to-door mail delivery. Sure, that's the same, Mark. Post-war leaders gave us the infrastructure of a nation. Carney gives us cluster mailboxes on the corner of your street. That's not really transformation. That's tinkering around the edges while pretending that he's doing some kind of war changing here. So on top of that, he's talking about an austerity budget. Now, a lot of Canadians don't even have an understanding of what the word austerity means. So let's talk about this talk of austerity for a second to make sure that we can lead into our next subject. So if we define that clearly, because a lot of Canadians, as I said, don't use that word every day, austerity simply means strict control over government spending. That's what austerity means. It usually means cutbacks to programs, public sector layoffs, and a government that tries to spend less than it takes in. Liberals. Okay. It's about tightening the belt to get finances under control. So if he truly puts in an austerity budget, which I don't believe is truly coming, he'll control spending. But here's the contradiction. While Carney lectures Canadians about austerity, his government is already doing the exact opposite. The parliamentary budget officer has already warned that deficits are ballooning to amounts that may be now wildly out of control. Debt to GDP ratios, which used to be the Liberals' proud fiscal anchor, are now completely ignored because they're horrible. Carney spends like a teenager with a first credit card and then turns around to lecture Canadians about making sacrifices. Remember when Chrystia Freeland all told us to cancel Disney Plus? That's hypocrisy at its finest, folks. And here's the thing. We've had prime ministers make bigger changes than anything Mark Carney is talking about. Think back to Brian Mulroney for a second. Back in the 1980s. Do we remember this if you were around? I was young, 5, 6 years old, I would say. His government, though, negotiated the free trade agreement with the United States, later expanded into what we knew as NAFTA before it became CUSMA. Whatever you thought of Brian Mulroney, those deals fundamentally reshaped Canada's economy. That wasn't even wartime. They created decades of integrated supply chains, secure exports, and prosperity tied to the world's largest market. That was huge transformation because that world's largest market was our very next door neighbor. Now you look at Mark Carney, and he flies to Mexico or to Europe on your dollar. He signs framework agreements to discuss future trade talks and calls it diversification. Just hang with me. We'll get there. It doesn't work that way, Mark. The numbers don't lie. Over 70% of Canadian exports still go to the U.S. Even if we doubled our trade with Mexico, it wouldn't replace what we'd lose if U.S. trade dipped by even 5%. Mulroney delivered real deals. Carney delivers photo ops on airplanes, up and down those plane steps like crazy. And here's the thing, there's also other examples in history, not of our country, but things we can compare to here. Do we remember the Marshall Plan? So after the war, the United States launched the Marshall Plan. Now, this was billions in aid to rebuild Europe from war. Now, isn't this what we're supposedly doing with Ukraine? We'll get to that in a second. But here's the key. All of this just wasn't money just tossed around. It came with checks and it came with balances. There were billions sent to Europe to rebuild, but all of the money was checked in on. European governments had to present detailed plans of how they were going to do it. Projects had to align with rebuilding infrastructure, restoring industries, and stabilizing democracy. Keep that in mind. Every dollar was accounted for, and it worked. Western Europe went from ruins to prosperity within less than a decade. Now, Carney's version of transformation, billions handed out to industries here at home and billions more shipped overseas, including Ukraine and especially to Ukraine, with almost no accountability. Unlike the Marshall Plan, Mark Carney and the Liberal government are not checking on a single dollar that went to Ukraine. Not one. And the Marshall Plan structure versus the liberal Ukrainian spending goes well beyond that fact. If we put some numbers on this, since the start of the full-scale invasion in 2022 of Ukraine, Canada has committed about $19.7 billion in total support to Ukraine. That includes over $12.4 billion in direct financial assistance to keep Ukraine's government running and paying pensions, plus another $6.5 billion in military aid. Those are staggering numbers for a country of just 40 million people. And yet, try to find a detailed public ledger of where exactly any of those dollars have gone. You won't find it. There are announcements like $835 million here for armored vehicles, drones, and ammunition. But there's no Marshall Plan style oversight whatsoever to the billions of your money sent over there. No audited reports, no strict conditions tying aid to measurable rebuilding or reform in Ukraine. It's a fog of money with no receipts. Imagine somebody just planting this money in your account and never checking on it again. Compare that to the Marshall Plan. Congress demanded accountability. Aid had to go toward industry, infrastructure, and democratic institutions. Every project that they paid for was vetted. Every outcome was measured. That's why it worked. It worked. Meanwhile, at home, Canada struggles to find its own priorities. Healthcare is in crisis, with Ottawa pledging $200 billion over 10 years just to stabilize the provincial health systems. In 2024 alone, total Canadian health spending reached about $372 billion, roughly 12.4% of our GDP. And yet, Canadians, despite that spending, still face ER closures, family doctor shortages, and ballooning wait times. So the message is very clear. Billions with no checks go overseas. While at home, Canadians can't even access the basics you think you're paying for in taxes, but really you're just paying for Ukraine. Carney wants to borrow the Marshall Plan's reputation, but his Ukraine spending doesn't look like reconstruction. It looks like political theater. Here's all the money. Do what you want with it. I get the credit for giving it to you. That's what it looks like. That's what he thinks is happening here. And this is actually what the entire Liberal government thinks is happening here. See, post-war leaders knew the country had to grow. So you can't compare this to this because he's only saying the country has to grow, but he clearly doesn't know it. They pushed immigration back then, expanded manufacturing, and built infrastructure that lifted all boats. Growth was the engine, but immigration even then was controlled, not like today when it's wildly out of control. Carney, on the other hand, talks about growth while quietly planning cuts to public services. 24,000 public sector jobs could vanish by 2028. Programs once hailed as essential are now on the chopping block. Funding for gender equality, or for example, is projected to collapse from 400 million to just 76 million. But that seems to be a platform he holds himself to, quietly collecting votes. And yet, at the same time, he's promising billions more for industrial spending. He's not transforming the country. He's moving money around like a shell game and hoping Canadians won't notice while giving the rest of it to Ukraine and justifying it as war. All of this is just smokescreen. Canada 2.0 that he talked about during the election, that he's now saying this budget will kick off, is just smokescreen. Let's not kid ourselves. This isn't about building a stronger country. It's about building a narrative to get himself reelected or switching to a majority government in the next election. Carney wants to have the prestige of being compared to post-war leaders without the heavy lifting or the work at all. He wants the soundbite of Canada 2.0 to go viral without the nation-building projects to actually back that up in any way. If Carney were serious, he'd be modernizing energy corridors, opening up the ability to do pipelines again, strengthening North American supply chains, reforming taxes to reward work and investment. Where have we heard that before? Oh, right, the Conservatives. And cutting the red tape, strangling small businesses. Instead, we get cluster mailboxes at the corner of your street now, ballooning deficits that are wildly out of control, foreign aid that have no receipts attached to them, and lectures about austerity from a man who's never practiced it himself at all, including when he was the governor of the Bank of England. So a Canada in decline, not transformation. That's what we've got here. That is the end result. When November 4th rolls around and the budget is finally released, remember this. Canada 2.0 isn't a new chapter of growth and unity. It's Canada on life support. That's what it is. A country being drained by slogans and spin, something they accused Pierre Poilievre of, but they used way more, and hollow comparisons to a generation that actually knew how to sacrifice and build, and people actually lost their lives in those cases as well, if we remember. Carney's transformation isn't transformation at all. It's decline with a marketing campaign. And unless Canadians wake up and start waking up right now and demand more, that's exactly where we're headed. The parliamentary budget officer has already warned this thing may be over. That's a scary line. And he's used other big words that are very scary as well. It's a time in Canada, folks, where we really have to stand up and pay attention. We have to stand up and pay attention to what our Prime Minister is saying, but also what he is not saying. Yesterday, we did a comparison of what it looks like when he's lying. Go and watch that video. It is something that he does on a regular basis. It has become habit for him. The ums and ahs have meaning. The pauses have meaning. The overuse of words like catalyze have meaning. We're in a very difficult position as a country with the wrong leader at the helm. Thanks for watching Bakes on Things. Don't forget again to like, subscribe. Of course, you can hype the video now if you have the availability to do so. And also join the conversation down below. What do you think? What do you think? Do we have the right guy in place? I think we know the answer. I think we should know the answer. If you're liberal, you should probably be waking up to this. But what do you think? Put it in the comments down below. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow with the first sip, bright and early in the morning, 6 a.m. We'll see you then. Have yourselves a great evening. See you tomorrow.